Mao Zedong, born on December 26, 1893, in Shaoshan, Hunan Province, China, was the leader who shaped China's communist revolution. He led the Chinese Communist Party from 1935 and served as chairman of the People's Republic of China from 1949 to 1959. Mao's leadership was pivotal in the transformation of China, guiding the nation through a period of monumental change and social upheaval. Though Mao did not always dominate the decisions within the Communist Party, especially during the early years and beyond the 1940s, his role as the principal architect of modern China is undeniable. Mao started out as a secondary figure in the CCP, but eventually became the central force behind the nation's political, social, and economic evolution. His leadership saw China emerge from decades of war and instability into a unified and powerful nation. Despite the challenges and controversies surrounding his policies, such as during the Cultural Revolution, Mao's vision and determination laid the foundation for the future of China. His legacy is integral to understanding the China of today, as he played a defining role in its rise to prominence on the world stage. Mao Zedong's life and leadership remain a defining chapter in China's history, making him one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. Mao Zedong was born in the small village of Shaoshan in Hunan Province, the son of a former peasant who had become wealthy through farming and grain dealing. Growing up, Mao was raised in an environment where education was valued primarily for practical purposes, like record-keeping and accounting. He began attending his village's primary school at the age of 8, where he learned the Confucian classics. But by the time he was 13, he was forced to work full-time on his family's farm. Rebellious against his father's authority and an arranged marriage he refused to acknowledge, Mao left his family to pursue education elsewhere. He studied at a higher primary school in a neighboring county and later at a secondary school in the provincial capital of Changsha, where he encountered new revolutionary ideas from Western political and cultural reformers like Liang Qichao and the nationalist leader Sun Yat-sen. In 1911, just as Mao was beginning to explore revolutionary ideas, a real revolution unfolded in front of him. The uprising against the Qing dynasty broke out in Wuchang and soon spread to Changsha. Mao enlisted in the Revolutionary Army in Hunan and served as a soldier for 6 months. While he might not yet fully understand the concept that political power grows out of the barrel of a gun, his brief military experience confirmed his admiration for military leaders, having idolized figures like Napoleon I and George Washington during his childhood. The spring of 1912 brought the birth of the new Chinese Republic, marking the end of Mao's time in the military. Over the next year, he bounced from one pursuit to another, enrolling in a police school, law school, and business school. During this period, he also studied history in a secondary school and spent time at the provincial library, reading many classic Western liberal works. While this wandering may seem like a sign of indecision, it reflected the uncertainty China faced during this time. The old system of civil service exams had been abolished in 1905, and Western learning was gradually being introduced in schools, leaving young people like Mao unsure about which path would best prepare them to serve their country. This was the beginning of Mao's journey toward finding his place in China's revolutionary future. Mao Zedong graduated from the first provincial normal school in Changsha in 1918. Although it was technically a secondary school, the institution offered a high level of instruction in Chinese history, literature, philosophy, and Western ideas. During his time there, Mao not only sharpened his academic skills, but also got his first taste of political activism. He played a key role in founding several student organizations, including the New People's Study Society in 1917-18, which would later produce several prominent members of the Communist Party. After graduating, Mao moved to Beijing and enrolled at Peking University, China's intellectual heart. He worked as a librarian's assistant for 6 months, but that short time would have a lasting impact on his future. It was during his time at Peking University that Mao met 2 men who would be instrumental in the founding of the Chinese Communist Party, Li Dazhao and Chen Duxiu. What's more, Mao arrived in Beijing just in time for the May 4th movement of 1919, a turning point in Chinese history. This movement sparked a wave of change that would shape China for the next 50 years, and it was here that Mao's political journey truly began to take shape. The May 4th movement is most commonly remembered for the student protests against the decision at the Paris Peace Conference to hand over former German concessions in Shandong province to Japan, instead of returning them to China. But the movement represents much more than that. It marked the beginning of a period of rapid political and cultural transformation in China, starting in 1915. This era saw Chinese radicals turn away from Western liberalism and embrace Marxism and Leninism as the answers to China's problems, ultimately leading to the founding of the Chinese Communist Party in 1921. Alongside these political shifts, China also saw a transformation in its written language, moving away from the difficult classical style to a more accessible, colloquial form. The May 4th protests themselves were sparked by intellectuals like Chen Duxiu, but the students quickly realized they were the ones taking charge. In a July 1919 editorial, Mao Zedong reflected on the significance of the moment, noting that his generation would forever see itself as responsible for China's future. This sense of responsibility lasted long after the protests, as this new generation would stay in power in both Beijing and Taipei until the 1970s. During the summer of 1919, Mao Zedong helped form various organizations in Changsha that united students, workers, and merchants in demonstrations aimed at pressuring the government to oppose Japan. His writings from this time often referenced the Army of the Red Flag around the world, as well as the victory of the Russian Revolution of 1917. However, it wasn't until January 1921 that Mao fully committed to Marxism as the guiding philosophy for China's revolution. The May 4th movement, in all its political, cultural, and intellectual upheaval, set the stage for the major transformations to come. In September 1920, Mao Zedong became the principal of the Lin Changsha Primary School and wasted no time in making a political impact. In October, he organized a branch of the Socialist Youth League in the area, showing his growing commitment to the revolution. That winter, Mao married Yang Kai-wei, the daughter of his former ethics teacher, marking a personal milestone. But it was the following year, in 1921, that Mao's political journey took a major step forward when he attended the first Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. This event brought together communist groups from across China, along with 2 delegates from the Comintern, or Communist International, based in Moscow. By 1923, Mao became one of the first communists to join Sun Yat-sen's Nationalist Party, or Kuomintang, as part of an alliance between the two parties. During the first half of 1924, he lived in Shanghai with his wife and 2 infant sons, where he played a leading role in the Nationalists' Executive Bureau. However, a trip back to his hometown of Shaoshan in the winter of 1924-25 would bring a significant shift in his thinking. While there, Mao witnessed the growing political awareness among peasants, sparked by the tragic shooting of several dozen Chinese by foreign police in Shanghai. This experience opened Mao's eyes to the revolutionary potential of the peasantry. Although he had been born into a peasant family, his intellectual years had led him to adopt the traditional view that workers and peasants were ignorant and unrefined. His earlier Marxist conversion had led him to revise his views on the urban proletariat, but he still held Marx's disdain for the rural peasants. Now, Mao saw the peasants not as backward but as the key to China's future. Inspired by other communists within the Nationalist Party who had begun organizing peasants, Mao set out to channel their protests into a powerful network of peasant associations, seeing them as the heart of China's revolution. Mao Zedong's journey took another twist when he was forced to flee Hunan, once again pursued by the military governor. This time, he sought refuge in the urban center of Guangzhou Canton, the stronghold of the nationalists. Despite being in the city, Mao continued to focus on the countryside, where he had already seen the seeds of revolution taking root. He became the acting head of the propaganda department of the Nationalist Party, editing its main publication, the Political Weekly, and attending the Second Kuomintang Congress in January 1926. But his commitment to the peasants remained strong. Mao also served as the principal of the Peasant Movement Training Institute in Guangzhou, where he trained a new generation of peasant activists. However, the political landscape in China was shifting rapidly. Chiang Kai-shek had taken control of the nationalists after Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925, While Chiang publicly supported the idea of the World Revolution and sought Soviet assistance, he was determined to remain in control of the Nationalist Party. In May 1926, he expelled most communists from key positions within the party, though Mao remained at the Peasant Movement Training Institute until October of that year. Many of the young peasants Mao had trained soon began working to strengthen the communist movement. In July 1926, Chiang launched the Northern Expedition, a campaign aimed at unifying China under his leadership by overthrowing the conservative government in Beijing and defeating other warlords. Mao, however, returned to Hunan in November 1926, where he closely investigated the peasant movement. By January 1927, he predicted that in a short time, hundreds of millions of peasants would rise up like a tornado or a tempest that no power could suppress. While this prediction didn't come to pass as Mao envisioned, the broader essence of his prophecy was validated. Chiang Kai-shek, who had once aligned with the workers and peasants, turned on them, massacring the Shanghai workers who had helped him seize the city. This marked the collapse of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin's strategy of revolution in alliance with the nationalists. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, was nearly destroyed in the cities and severely weakened in the countryside. But Mao's vision didn't end there. In October 1927, he led a small group of surviving peasants from the autumn harvest uprising in Hunan to the Jinggang Mountains, located on the border of Jiangxi and Hunan provinces. Here, Mao embarked on a new type of revolutionary warfare, focusing on the countryside and the establishment of the Red Army. While the immediate mass peasant uprisings Mao had envisioned didn't materialize, his new approach to revolution relied on the unwavering support of China's vast peasant population. This support would prove crucial during the long civil war, as Mao's forces encircled the cities from the countryside, eventually leading to the defeat of Chiang Kai-shek and the communist victory that established the People's Republic of China. Mao Zedong's 22 years in the wilderness can be broken down into 4 distinct phases, with the first being a crucial period in the early 1930s. In these first 3 years, Mao, alongside Zhu De, the commander-in-chief of the Red Army, developed the tactics of guerrilla warfare from base areas deep in the countryside. These operations were seen by Mao and his allies as a temporary measure, a way to hold their ground while waiting for the next urban revolutionary wave to rise. The hope was that revolution would be sparked in China's cities, but reality quickly proved otherwise. In the summer of 1930, the Central Committee ordered the Red Army to occupy several major cities in south-central China, aiming to ignite a workers' revolution. However, as it became clear that this strategy would lead only to heavy losses, Mao made the bold decision to disobey orders. He withdrew his forces and returned to the southern Jiangxi base, where he would regroup and refocus his efforts. During this difficult time, Mao faced personal tragedy as well. His first wife was executed by the nationalists. Amidst the chaos, Mao remarried, taking He Zizhen as his second wife, with whom he had been living since 1928. This marked the beginning of a crucial turning point in Mao's leadership and his strategy for the future. The second phase of Mao Zedong's revolutionary journey, known as the Jiangxi period, began in November 1931 with the founding of the Jiangxi Soviet, later known as the Chinese Soviet Republic, in a part of Jiangxi province. Mao was named its chairman. With little support from the cities, the revolution's future seemed to lie in the gradual strengthening and expansion of the rural base areas. The Soviet regime quickly grew to control a population of several million people, and the Red Army swelled to about 200,000 strong. They successfully repelled several attacks from Chiang Kai-shek's forces during the first 4 encirclement and annihilation campaigns. However, they couldn't withstand Chiang's elite units, and in October 1934, Mao, his troops, and his pregnant wife had no choice but to abandon their base in Jiangxi and begin their fateful journey to the northwest on the Long March. During this period, there's much debate among historians about the extent of Mao's real power, especially in the years between 1932 and 1934. Many experts believe that during the final years of the Jiangxi Soviet, Mao was more of a figurehead, with limited control over military strategies and decisions, which were often made by other party leaders. Despite this, it was during the Long March, particularly at the Jinyi Conference in January 1935, that Mao effectively consolidated his leadership over the Communist Party, though he still didn't officially hold the title of chairman. This marked a pivotal moment in Mao's rise to power, setting the stage for his future role in shaping the direction of the Chinese Revolution. In 1935, when around 8,000 survivors of the Long March arrived in Shanxi province in northwestern China, events began shifting toward the third phase of Mao Zedong's revolutionary journey. This phase, often called the Yan'an period, marked a renewed united front with the nationalists against Japan and saw Mao rise to unchallenged supremacy within the Communist Party. In August 1935, the Comintern's 7th Congress in Moscow called for an anti-fascist united front, which the Chinese Communists, for the first time, accepted could include Chiang Kai-shek himself. The breakthrough came in December 1936 with the Xi'an incident, where Chiang was kidnapped by military leaders who preferred fighting Japan to continuing the civil war with the Communists. This event accelerated the unity between the nationalists and Communists. By the time Japan began its invasion of China in July 1937, a new united front was nearly established. The Communists adapted their military strategy to break up large portions of their army into small guerrilla units, effectively controlling vast areas of the countryside and gaining the support of millions of peasants. As Japan's occupation continued, the Communist forces grew to between 500,000 and 1 million soldiers, gaining political control over up to 90 million people. Mao's agrarian policies, alongside the nationalistic resistance against Japan, played a key role in securing peasant support. During this period of reflection and writing between 1936 and 1940, Mao synthesized his revolutionary experience and his vision for the future. His works, such as On Practice and On Contradiction, explored the principles of dialectical materialism. He also outlined his military strategies and strategic problems of China's Revolutionary War and on protracted war. Mao adopted a conciliatory stance toward the nationalists at first, acknowledging their leading role in the anti-Japanese fight. But by 1939, as the political landscape shifted, Mao asserted that the Communists should take leadership in the revolution. He also laid out a vision for the country to be ruled by a joint dictatorship of several parties under the anti-Japanese United Front, but with the ultimate goal of the Communists taking power for the shift to socialism. Meanwhile, Mao's personal life also evolved. In 1939, he divorced his second wife, Yi Zizhen, and married Jiang Qing, a well-known film actress who had changed her name. Amidst personal changes, Mao also solidified his leadership within the Communist Party, surpassing his rivals, Wang Ming and Zhang Guotao, who were accused of being too submissive to the nationalists. Mao's rise to dominance was also linked to his sinification of Marxism, adapting it to Chinese conditions and the unique cultural and political realities of the nation. This period was critical in shaping Mao's position as the undisputed leader of China's Communist Revolution. Mao Zedong, unlike many top CCP leaders, didn't have first-hand knowledge of how communism functioned in the Soviet Union. He couldn't read Karl Marx or Lenin in the original texts like some of his peers, but he had a unique understanding of China's needs and conditions. This distinction came to a head during the rectification campaign of 1942-43. The campaign aimed to ground the growing number of new party members in Marxist theory and Leninist principles of party organization. But there was a second, equally important aspect. Mao wanted to rid the party of what he called foreign dogmatism, the blind imitation of Soviet methods and unwavering obedience to Soviet directives. In March 1943, Mao achieved formal supremacy within the CCP, becoming chairman of both the Secretariat and the Politburo. Soon after, the rectification campaign turned into a harsh purge of party members who weren't sufficiently loyal to Mao. This move was orchestrated by Kang Sheng, who would later become one of Mao's key supporters during the Cultural Revolution. While Soviet critics later exaggerated the purge, accusing Mao of targeting those devoted to proletarian internationalism, meaning loyalty to Moscow, Mao's intentions were clear. He wanted to ensure the Chinese Communist Party followed its own path, independent of Soviet influence. As Mao's campaign moved into its final phase of civil war with the nationalists, tensions with the Soviet Union began to escalate. Stalin's lack of enthusiasm for a Chinese communist victory became more obvious. When the People's Liberation Army, PLA, captured the nationalist capital, Nanjing, in April 1949, Soviet Ambassador Andrei Gromyko was the only foreign diplomat who accompanied the retreating nationalist government to Guangzhou. Mao would later reflect on Stalin's attitude, stating that Stalin didn't believe the Chinese communists could secure a decisive victory and saw them as a potential problem if they succeeded. This marked the beginning of the Sino-Soviet split, as Mao's vision for China's revolution grew increasingly at odds with Soviet expectations. When the communists finally took power in China, both Mao and Stalin had to adjust to the new reality. In December 1949, just 2 months after proclaiming the People's Republic of China, Mao traveled to Moscow for intense negotiations with Stalin. After 2 months of discussions, Mao succeeded in convincing Stalin to sign a treaty of mutual assistance and provide limited economic aid. However, before China could benefit from the economic resources, they were thrust into the Korean War, supporting North Korea, which was aligned with Moscow. It was only after this involvement, according to Mao, that Stalin began to trust him, realizing Mao was not simply a Chinese nationalist, but a leader with global ambitions. Despite these early tensions with Moscow, the policies of the newly formed People's Republic of China closely mirrored Soviet models, as Mao himself later admitted. The Chinese communists had experience in guerrilla warfare, peasant mobilization, and grassroots political organization, but they lacked expertise in state governance and large-scale economic development. In this context, the Soviet Union became the only model available. By 1953, a 5-year plan was implemented with Soviet guidance, including technical assistance and complete industrial plants. But within just 2 years, Mao took steps that would ultimately lead to the breakdown of China's political and ideological alliance with Moscow. In the spring of 1949, Mao made a significant proclamation about the future of China's revolution. While the revolution had previously followed the unconventional path of encircling the cities from the countryside, he now declared that the future would see the cities leading and guiding the countryside. This shift in strategy aligned with Mao's 1950 agreement with Liu Shaoqi that collectivization would only happen once China's heavy industry provided the necessary equipment for mechanization. However, by 1955, Mao reversed his position. He believed the social transformation in China could progress faster than the technical transformation. Inspired by the success of certain cooperatives that had drastically improved their conditions without outside help, Mao began to believe in the boundless potential of the Chinese people, especially the rural masses, to reshape both nature and their social relations when united for revolutionary goals. Mao's bold vision for rapid collectivization began to take shape when he criticized the leadership, calling those skeptical of his ideas old women with bound feet. His remarks sparked a wave of enthusiasm, resulting in the swift implementation of collectivization, often bypassing collective decision-making processes in the party. Mao's tendency to push forward with his goals outside the party structure continued to grow stronger. As Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev denounced Stalin's crimes in 1956, Mao was already focused on improving intellectual morale to secure their participation in building a new China. In April 1956, he introduced the Let 100 Flowers Bloom policy, advocating for freedom of expression. Mao believed the contradictions in Chinese society were non-antagonistic and hoped this policy would prevent the rise of a repressive political climate like that of Stalin's Soviet Union. However, when the policy led to widespread disorder and criticism of party rule, Mao harshly turned against the intellectuals, accusing them of betraying his trust. From then on, he would rely on the creativity of the rank and file to drive modernization, sending specialists to work in the countryside if they weren't read enough. This shift set the stage for the Great Leap Forward, which Mao launched in May 1958. His economic strategy was more nuanced than often portrayed in later years. Despite his focus on industrialization and a technical revolution, Mao was deeply concerned about the corrupting influence of technological progress. He longed for the egalitarian purity of the earlier revolutionary days in the Jinggang Mountains in Yenin, reflecting his continuing anxiety about the moral and political challenges posed by rapid modernization. In the late 1950s, Mao Zedong's vision for China's future took a bold turn with the introduction of the People's Communes as part of the Great Leap Forward. after the peasants had already been organized into cooperatives and fully socialist collectives just a few years prior. The 1958 shift turned their world upside down once again. The communes were massive social units, often comprising several thousand households, but there was no sufficient infrastructure or administrative experience to manage them effectively. Unsurprisingly, this resulted in chaos and economic disaster across the country. By the winter of 1958 to 59, Mao realized that some changes were necessary. He acknowledged the need for decentralization and a reduction in the overambitious production targets in both agriculture and industry. However, despite these adjustments, he insisted that his vision for China's socialist path, with the communes at its core, was still fundamentally sound. He believed that even though China was poor and blank, it could leap ahead of other nations with the right push. Then, in the summer of 1959, at the Lushan Conference, Peng Dehuai, China's Minister of Defense, openly criticized the excesses of the Great Leap and the economic devastation it caused. For daring to speak out, Peng was swiftly removed from all party and state positions, detained, and eventually died during the Cultural Revolution. From that point on, Mao took any criticism of his policies as an unforgivable affront to his authority. Disagreeing with Mao became a grave offense, punishable by severe repercussions.